Hello and welcome to day 9 of the Dominion Menagerie bonus previews. Today we are looking at a new event, Stampede, which is a 5-cost event, and it says if you have 5 or fewer cards in play, gain 5 horses onto your deck. So, first of all, I guess I'd just like to point out that this is a pretty new part of the design space for Dominion. We don't really have anything else that cares about this exact kind of condition. There are some other cards that function in ways that are similar, to what you'll need to think about with Stampede, but so some examples of that are cards like Leprechaun and Magic Lamp, where you don't necessarily. So in the case of Magic Lamp, it's not that you are going to have too many in general, but if you end up duplicating or putting duplicate actions into play, then it becomes harder to hit the condition. So in practice, you can end up with something kind of like this. And with Leprechaun, it's you're trying to hit a target in the middle and not go under or over. But it's not necessarily about just like fewer cards in play in general. And then let's see, what was the other example I had thought of? I guess this is really specific, but if you want to stonemason for peddlers, then you need to make sure that you don't discount them down to 0, because then you can't do it anymore. But so yeah, these are some pretty specific examples, and they don't really do the same thing as what Stampede does in any case for a couple of reasons. Number one, they none of them are just like you blanketly want to have like fewer than some threshold. It's mostly like trying to hit some like balance or whatever. And then the other much bigger difference probably is that Stampede cares about treasures, and Magic Lamp does care about treasures, but like Leprechaun generally doesn't care about treasures, with the exception of things like Black Market and Storyteller and Villa. And like the peddler thing doesn't care about treasures. It's like very unusual to be counting like all of the cards that you have in play towards any kind of condition like that, where you want to like reduce them. Like obviously for a card like Horn of Plenty, you want more of them, right? But this is pretty unusual in that respect, and I think it's gonna be like a different sort of like little mini game to try to solve if you want to be able to Stampede. Like, okay, how do I make sure that I only have 5 cards in play at most? Because for example, I mean, this might not be a good opening, but just to illustrate the concept, if you like open with like a lab, and then you draw with your lab, and then you play 5 coppers, you can't buy Stampede. Like that little bit of like what am I trying to say, like you would have to have also like added a silver, or like not drawn with the lab and just had the 5 coppers, or like that sort of thing. Like it's a pretty stringent condition potentially, and I think probably that's like part of the design intent is that like this is a card that you can use to like recover from a dud. So as an example of some other things that that really make it hard to get Stampede is things like duration draw. So Wharf, Archive, Caravan, Hireling, like these are all cards that, because you already have them in play at the start of your turn, make it that much less likely that you're going to be able to get through a turn without playing more than 5 cards. The dud part is not so applicable to Hireling, but like in general, those are also cards that have like where there's a sort of a snowball effect. If you have a dud where you had this duration draw, and then for whatever reason you didn't draw the other duration draw one turn, now you don't have any duration draw in place, so now you don't find your draw again. And one way like you can get out of that spiral potentially is by buying Stampede. And because you don't because you had the dud, maybe you have fewer cards in play because you didn't draw the stuff that you need to have a good turn. So I think it's duration draw is just a specific example. I think in general that's like kind of the design concept here is that you can use this to like get from a place where you're not playing a lot of stuff because your deck isn't doing a whole lot into a place where it is. That being said, that's not the only time that it's going to be relevant because, you know, for example, if you're just playing sort of like a money-ish deck, and you have a turn where, you know, you just don't line up your treasures, I mean, I guess you could say that that's still a dud. But, you know, well, actually, okay, so yeah, you could say that that's a dud, and you could just buy, excuse me, you could buy Stampede, and then the next turn you're very likely to hit whatever price point. But like, suppose you're playing something that's like pretty money-ish, but does have some like plus buy, for example, and you have like, you know, maybe you have like some platinums or something, right? So you have like a lot of money, but you didn't have to play a lot of cards to do it. You know, you play like, so you play like a bunch of platinum and you buy like Colony Stampede, and then that enables you to like double Colony the following turn or something along those lines, right? I don't know how realistic that is. It probably isn't very realistic. Like, I guess the point is that like there may be scenarios where if your deck is sort of payload efficient enough that you can have like get multiple, either you have like some gainers or you have a couple buys and you have like enough money that you can like Stampede and then also buy something else, like that would be really nice. I don't know how often that's actually going to come up because, again, like you're gonna have to be really efficient to be able to get that all in 5 cards. But you know, maybe it's possible. You know, maybe you do, I don't know, like something like play I was gonna say, you know, something like play like 4 grand markets in a platinum or something like that, but then why aren't you just buying Colony? I don't know. It's hard for me to come up with scenarios, but I guess, yeah, so I think the number one use case for this is like getting your deck back up and running if it crashes for a turn. Although you do still need to hit 5. So that's the other thing, is that it's tricky because on the one hand, like you know, the only 5 cards requirement means that like if your deck is doing a lot of stuff, you're probably not going to be able to Stampede. But on the other hand, like if your deck isn't doing a lot of stuff, like that can potentially mean it's hard to hit 5, right? So like there's a sort of weird balancing act there too, where you know, like if you're gonna rely on like drawing a bunch of coppers to Stampede, that's probably not going to work. You're probably going to at least, you know, want like some silvers or golds in your deck or something, or like the action equivalent, in order to be able to do this, even in the scenarios where you do have like a weak turn. But yeah, I guess I can definitely see this being like a good thing to do like late in the game where, you know, you're running out of, your deck is running out of gas, and this is like a, you know, a temporary injection of a lot of power into your deck, that can really change the dynamic in terms of like, okay, you know, like maybe, for example, if you know you're pretty likely to hit 5, like maybe in general, maybe you're willing to like take a province in a scenario where like you're not as confident. Like, so, you know, there's plenty of times when you wonder like, okay, I could take a province here, my deck is running out of steam, my opponent is going to catch up over time. If I take the province, you know, now, well, you know, that gives my opponent less time to catch up, but at the same time, if I can't close it out in the next couple turns, then like my opponent is going to catch up. And so do I just, you know, like take the duchy? Well, usually you don't, but like maybe here, it feels safer to take that province because you take the province, and then the next turn, if you don't get the next province, you can Stampede, and the next turn you're really, really likely to hit province. And so like there's some kind of like reward for playing like a more aggressively greening deck in that context, because even though you might dud like you're much less likely to dud multiple times in a row. So again, this all just comes back to what I was saying about dudding. So yeah, I think that's the primary use case. We'll have to see if there's something else you can do with this. I mean, for sure, like if you have things that allow you, I'm really just thinking of Villa here. If you have Villa, you know, you can potentially like play like some number of cards. I mean, you still have to get 9 coins, which is kind of a lot to get with 5 or fewer cards in play. But if you can do it, you can then buy like Villa Stampede, or Stampede Villa rather, and then, you know, top deck all those horses and then like play your turn on with a bunch of extra draw injected into it. I don't know how realistic that is though. Another thing that would be fun is if you have like a livery in play and you buy this, then you get never mind, that doesn't work because livery is they have to cost 4 or more. So forget I said anything about that. But yeah, I think this is going to be like, maybe another way to say it is this is going to be like something of a catch-up card, not like catch-up from like a points deficit, but from like how well is your deck performing standpoint, if only because in general the underperforming deck is the one that's going to have access to this. It's going to be really, really hard to stampede when your deck is doing good things. So this is gonna maybe have some kind of like rubber banding effect in games where like it's gonna like counteract snowball effects somewhat. But we'll have to play with it and see, because, you know, I've never really had to worry about like how many, like, do I have too many cards in play before, and I'm not sure that I have like a great intuition for that. Anyway, that'll do it for this review. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again tomorrow for another one. Till then.